Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee taking place from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. It's Wednesday the 24th of May and the time is just after 9:30 a.m. My name is Councillor Jane Rutter and I'm the Chair of the Planning Committee. Around the table we have the elected members of the committee and we are supported today by a number of officers. We have with us Lorna Hutchings, who's our planning manager, Daniel Lucas, our legal advisor. The case officer will sit there where Cameron Taylor is sitting, but they will change with the items. And Matthew Watson from Democratic Service will be taking the minutes. And if that carries on, I won't be pleased. Okay. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded to the Council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available and advice on how to turn this on is set out on the website. Please can I remind everyone to ensure your mobile phones are on silent or preferably turned off entirely. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow the instructions given to you by our team. There is a handout provided on your chairs and I hope you noticed the information slides which were displayed as you walked in for further guidance about this meeting. These will also be displayed whenever there is a break in the proceedings. Finally, can I welcome members of the public to the meeting? Those of you who have registered to speak, I will invite you forward when it is time for you to make your contribution. The microphone is turned on by pressing the button on the base of the unit and a timer will appear on the screen to remind you of the time remaining to you. Turning now to the agenda. Our first duty this morning is to appoint a vice chair of the committee for this year. I would like to nominate Councillor Chris Edwards. Do I have a seconder for that nomination, please?
I'm very happy to second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gordon-Smith. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Lovely. Councillor Edwards, would you like to come and join me up here, please? Thank you very much. Very good. Thank you very much. Lovely. So now, oh, Matthew, we're coming to you now. So are there any apologies or deputy members, please, Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. No apologies or deputy members for today's meeting. Thank
Lovely.
you.
Thank you. Do we have any disclosures of interest from members or officers relating to the matters to be discussed? I would like to disclose an interest in item, whichever one it is, number 10. It's just in my ward, but I have had no discussions with the parish council or anybody else concerned with it. So I have no, there's no reason why I shouldn't be involved in discussing that item. Are there any other disclosures of interest? Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. The first item is in my ward, although I've had no discussions with anybody about that. And the other planning application comes in this afternoon. Obviously, people have brought that up to my attention when I was canvassing, being part of my ward, but I have no preconceived ideas on that whatsoever.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, for the purposes of transparency, I must declare that I had a conversation yesterday with the applicant on item 12, and I shall recuse myself from that discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ashwell.
Yes, agenda item 13 regarding Leafy Lane. I'm the ward councillor of that area, but I haven't spoken to the applicant.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Chairman, this is, I don't know, maybe we're changing direction, but we never used to announce that we were members of a particular ward that had an application here. if we'd taken part in that application prior to this, then that was the time to declare it. So yes, like everybody else, application number 9 is in my ward.
I think we're doing this for complete transparency and to avoid any concerns of bias.
It's a nice time, fella.
Thank you, Councillor Small.
Also item 13, same as Councillor Atchwell in my ward.
Thank you. I think we're absolutely clear. So we will now move to where's my agenda? Minutes of the previous meeting that were held on the 19th of April. Can I take those as agreed, please? Agreed? Thank you. Okay. Can we accept the update sheet as an addendum to the report? Agreed. Thank you. Now we move to item number 7 on your agenda, which is the first planning application. This is reference 22000951 FUL, 1 Catways in Hursley. And the officer presenting is Cameron Taylor. If you'd like to present your thoughts to us, Cameron. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this presentation is for a proposed new dwelling on the garden land at number 1 Catways in Hursley. On the first slide, we have the location plan in the left-hand section with the site marked by the red outline. And the right-hand plan shows the site plan itself, which has been reorientated with Port Lane being on the bottom of the photo of the drawing and Heathcote Place being located on the right-hand side for reference. Next, we have an aerial photograph with the site marked by the yellow triangle. With where the mouse cursor is currently where number 1 Catways itself is located. Next, we have the front elevational drawing proposed. The right-hand dwelling there is the proposed dwelling, with the dwelling on the left-hand side is number 1 Catways itself. Next, we have a photograph which is the front elevation of number 1 Catways, followed by the street scene drawing with Heathcote Place located on the right, proposed dwelling centrally, and number 1 and number 2 Catways located on the left. Next, we have a photo from the street scene looking towards the site itself. I would like to note the access for the site, which is along there with sort of the drop curve, which comes sort of off Heathcote Place itself. Next, you have the rear elevational drawings that's proposed, followed by a photo from the rear of the site facing Port Lane and number 1 Catways. Next, we have the side elevation, which is the side which will be facing Heathcote Place itself. And a photo from within Heathcote Place looking towards the site, with the dwelling visible being number 1 Catways. Next, we have the side elevation drawings. This elevation will be the one which is facing number 1 Catways. Next, we have the proposed ground floor plans. We can see dwelling itself with the garage located towards the rear of the site, followed by the proposed first floor and roof drawings, with the front elevation being that elevation which is at the bottom where my mouse cursor currently is. I'd like to note that the title is incorrect on this, as it should be a garage store plans. As I say, this is the garage proposed, which will be located to the rear of the site, followed by a photo which is looking towards the location of the garage. Next, we have the photos of the access, with the left-hand photo being that from Port Lane looking down the access, and the right-hand photo being from across Heathcote Place. It is currently a pedestrian dropped curve, which is at the location at the corner of Port Lane and Heathcote Place. They originally used as an access to a water and sewage treatment plant and has been used for over 10 years by number 1 Catways. So the Planning Commission in 2021 just granted for extension of the garage to number 1 Catways, which also included an access which included parking to the front. And so the access itself, which is already in use, has not been proposed to be altered or changed in any way. So, and sort of for that reason, Highways, Hampshire County Council for Highways were not consulted on as it was felt that highway safety was sort of not identified as a significant issue in that original application. Highways were consulted under this current application. They concerned with the use of drop curb. They say it was never not approved by the county, and say the concerns were with the potential intensification of this use, which could potentially raise highways safety concerns due to the location of the access. So here we have further photos from located on the access itself, looking down Heathcote Place, and the right-hand photo, which is looking towards Port Lane, with this being pedestrian access to Catways. So for this application, with the officer recommendation being for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we now move to the public speaking. We have two objectors first, Polly Evans and James Brownlee. Would you like to come forward? You have 3 minutes between you. Have you decided how you're going to share those 3 minutes? Okay, fine. You can switch on your microphones now, that's fine. The timer doesn't start until you start speaking. So when you're ready, thank you.
Members of the committee, this application represents the overdevelopment of garden land, and the Highways Authority has raised serious safety concerns. It should be refused. The application proposes vehicular access across public land owned by the council and a pavement. In their report, the officer claims that this is acceptable due to a previous permitted application for the extension of the existing house. However, the application discussed today is fundamentally different and describes access for 2 houses. The application proposes access across a pavement and directly onto a junction. It is not safe. The Highways Authority objects to the proposal to intensify the use of this access because of serious safety concerns. Its concerns remain unresolved. The officer's report describes existing access as being used for over 10 years. However, it is not for this application to determine the lawfulness of the existing access. What is before you today is an application to intensify the use of an unsafe access, which the Highway Authority deems to be unacceptable and dangerous. The properties on Catways are not adjacent to the road, and the pavement is their only level access. The safety of this should not be compromised. The proposal has other significant shortcomings. The design is not in keeping with Catways properties. There's no assessment on the impact of trees. The layout is cramped and its parking arrangement is contrived. It's clearly an overdevelopment of the site. It's the responsibility of this committee to seriously consider the safety concerns raised by the Highway Authority, as well as the genuine concerns of neighbours and the parish council.
Chair, members of the committee, I oppose this application. It is an overdevelopment of the site, wrong house in the wrong place. It is sited too close to trees on the adjacent piece of land. The groundworks will inevitably damage the roots and canopy. These mature trees are an asset to the area and a haven for wildlife. The design is not in keeping with the other properties in Catway and has no other architectural merit. The site already has planning permission for sizable extension and reworking of the outbuildings. If this were also enacted, then it would be a gross overdevelopment. The proposed formalisation of a driveway is not supported by Hampshire Highways, who view it as a safety risk to pedestrians and other road users. This alone should be sufficient cause for rejection. As can be seen in your support package, the current residents of One Catways are parking their cars on Heathcote Place. An additional property will only increase pressure on parking, which at times has resulted in service vehicles such as bin wagons not being able to access Heathcote Place. There is no detail in the plan concerning the mitigation of risk to the water main and sewer running across the site. This should be in place to ensure residents of Catways, Heathcote Place and Port Lane do not suffer a loss of service. Absentee landlords do not have to live with the results of their money-making schemes. Those of us in the neighbourhood do.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for sticking to your time so accurately. Don't go yet. Members of the committee may have questions of clarification for you. So members, do we have any questions for our Councillor Laming?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that there is problems with access to Heathcote Place for delivery vehicles and that. How often does that happen?
Sorry, could you use your...
It's not that frequent, but it does occur. And there have been occasions in the past when vehicles have been damaged by vehicles such as building wagons and stuff like that, trying to enter the Heathcote Place.
Thank you.
I have a question, which you may be able to answer, but don't worry if you can't. That lane was used to access a sewage plant, was it? Do either of you know anything about that?
No, I believe that was in place before the houses on Heathcote Place were built. So it was before I've lived there. So it's in excess of 20 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, members? No, thank you very much indeed. You may return to your seats. Thank you. We now have a parish council representative from Hursley Parish Council, Councillor Eleanor Bell. Eleanor, you know the routine very well, so I won't, but just remind you that you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, I was going to ask, is that echoing?
It's fine, it's just on.
Okay, I was going to ask for the site plan to be displayed, but I see you can't because of the timer. So could I just ask the councillors to look at that at the front of your pack, because it is instructive. Thank you. Good morning. I'm speaking on behalf of Hursley Parish Council, which strongly objects to this application. I endorse the views of the residents who live in the vicinity of One Catways, all of whom also strongly object. I had urged a preemptive site visit so that committee members could appreciate the rural nature of this corner of Port Lane. It may still be appropriate to make such a recommendation. This is the wrong house in the wrong place. Numbers 1 to 6 Catways are 3 pairs of semis built as rural council houses in the 1950s. A pedestrian path leads to the front gardens with a grassy bank between them and the lane. They form a harmonious group, now most privately owned, and it's pure chance that a field track, which used to lead to a small sewage works, has been absorbed into the end property. It is not a substantial corner plot. It is a tapering plot with a track alongside, which forms part of the rural history of the village. The woodland verge forms no part of this property and must be protected. The proposed new build crowds and contrasts with this ensemble. Its materials may echo those elsewhere in the village, but not the dwelling it is adjacent to. An earlier application for a side extension to number 1 was permitted by Winchester. Not satisfied with this, the applicant has come back for a bigger bite. The new build has been positioned further back on the site, but in so doing, the amenity value of the existing dwelling and garden to number 1 is severely reduced. Its side access and rear garden is restricted, and the proposed parking and turning area for the new build is right next to its front windows. Parking is a major problem in Hursley and is particularly bad around this site. There's not sufficient parking in the lay-by on Park Lane, and parking spills into Heathcote Place with the difficulties that you have heard. Hampshire Highways are categoric that the small dropped curb right on the corner and intended for pedestrian use is unacceptable for standard vehicle access. It has been tolerated over the years for the existing dwelling, but cannot be used for a new build, nor can it be increased in this location. We believe this property should be left as it is. They may wish to do a modest side or rear extension, but an additional separate dwelling must be refused. This is not to say that the parish council is against new development. It has identified several locations around the village where a small number of new dwellings could be built, but not here.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bell. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for Councillor Bell? No, I think you were very clear. Thank you very much. Thank you. There is no ward council representation, so we move to the supporter, Caroline Downey. Ms. Downey, if you'd like to come forward and switch on the microphone, and when you start speaking, your 3 minutes will commence. Thank you. Oh, excuse me, we only have one supporter registered.
we registered Mr. Church to be here to speak, and it's on the, he was accepted as a speaker on the, it's not on the update paper though.
Okay, thank you very much. That's fine. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you this morning. As outlined by the officer, the application before you is for a new dwelling on garden land at 1 Catways in Hursley. As outlined in the report before you, officers are recommending approval of this application, and yet due to the number of local objections is being considered here this morning. The main objections are in relation to parking, design and materials, and the location of the plot. The corner site is a larger than average garden at 1 Catways. The whole plot of 1 Catways is over 65% larger than number 2 Catways and 40% larger than the other gardens that make up the group of houses at 1 to 6 Catways. Parking for the group of houses is on Port Lane, which is already congested. There has been mention by one of the objectors of a field track. The land was purchased by the family when they bought 1 Catways off the council under the Right to Buy scheme in 1988 and was part of the conveyancing at the time. Of note, the family were residents at number 1 Catways prior to the purchase since 1977. The previous application for an extension to the existing dwelling at 1 Catways was approved alongside a garage. This application before you does not extend that footprint of that permission, merely separates the proposed dwelling to add to the housing stock for the borough. 1 Catways has its own parking due to a dropped curb, which you've heard about, which has been used by the family since 1977, so over 45 years, and is therefore a lawful access. The new dwelling at the site will utilise this lawful access, and therefore officers has agreed that this cannot be a reason for refusal. The site will now be able to contribute the existing 1 parking space at number 1 Catways and 2 new additional parking spaces for the proposed new dwelling. The policy therefore is acceptable in terms of local plan policy DM18. The design is in keeping with the local vernacular, although it differs from the design and materials used at Catways. This was designed deliberately to give a degree of separation from the group of houses. The hanging and brick facade is akin to Hampshire design in the area. Therefore, officers agree that the scheme complies with policy CP13, DM15 and DM16. Other factors that have been considered that are worthy of note are the historic environment policy CP20 and DM29 and neighbourhood amenity DM17. The report before you clearly examines these policies, and officers have found that the development will not have any adverse impact on them. We concur with the officers that the development is acceptable on this site. They believe that the impact on the character and the appearance of the area is acceptable and would not result in any adverse harm. Furthermore, the site is in the defined settlement boundary of Hursley and therefore complies with MTRA 3. We therefore respectfully ask members to follow officers' guidance and approve the application before you today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Good timing as well. Gosh, everybody's been very good this morning. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for the supporter? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. You state that the driveway arrangement is quite a few years old and has been used by number 1. This is now going to be used by 2 properties, not just number 1.
Absolutely, but it's still a lawful access up to that building.
Thank you.
Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. The report states that the existing dwelling has been utilising the dropped curb for over 10 years. Can you tell me whether it's been used for vehicular access at the moment and it has been used as such, or whether that would be an additional use of the dropped curb?
So number 1 Catways have been using that drop curb as a driveway to park in front of number 1 Catways for well over 10 years. It's probably more like 40, 45 years. And so that access and the parking arrangement has been in situ for an extremely long time. And the new dwelling, as you can see from the site plan, is set slightly back, and therefore the arrangement has enabled number 1 Catways to retain its existing parking space whereas the new dwelling would have 2 additional parking spaces, very much to take away the pressure from Port Lane parking at the front of number 1 to 6 Catways.
I'm a little bit confused because the report says that there'll be an additional car parking space in front of 1 Catways. Is that correct or not?
I think that the existing car parking space is already there, and then there'll be an additional 2. So there's effectively there'll be 3 parking spaces. So an addition of 2 parking spaces to the existing one that's currently there.
The additional dwelling.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Any other questions or clarification, members? No? Thank you very much. You may return to your seats. Thank you. Okay, Cameron, we return to our case officer. Do you have anything to add to your report following the public contributions?
I don't have anything further to add. Thank you, Chair.
Right, members, we now turn to questions to our officer. I will take questions on the whole report because it's not that long. So do we have any questions for Cameron? Councillor Laming.
I'm slightly confused on the access to this because the drop curb was apparently put in for pedestrian use, not a driveway. If we look at the fact that highways are putting an objection into this particular application, we are told that the Highways Authority is a statutory consultee and we should always take note of what they say. So therefore, we're going against that particular item. If we go back in time to the application we had in 41 Harrowdown on Badger Farm, that was rejected because the driveway was too close to the junction and is straight onto a junction. So I'm a little confused on how we can actually allow this to go through because it seems to be contradictory to what we're told all the way through. And then we've got the other problem on this particular site of where it's being built so close to the trees. I'm concerned that we haven't had a report from the tree officer which looks at the roots of the trees and how they're going to be preserved.
Mr. Taylor?
So within regards to the trees, as I say, there is a condition in place which prior to the commencement of any works be undertaken, a tree survey and sort of associated mitigation should be then sort of submitted to us for, let's say, through consultation with our tree officer to sort of demonstrate if there is any harm or sort of any potential mitigation, so that the trees along the site which are not within the red outline of the site itself are then protected and thus won't be adversely affected by the proposal new dwelling.
Chair, that works, thank you. I thought I would take the highway question because there's quite a lot of considerations in this respect, and it has been made as a recommendation to you as a very balanced issue. The County Council set out their objection to us, which is copied into page 17. What they express is a potential intensification of use, which we know is 1 additional dwelling, and what they have then said their concerns were safety. We did press them for further detail in respect of what safety that meant in this case, but they weren't particularly forthcoming with that, so we weren't able to really look into the details, so it was quite generic concern from them. So I just wanted to highlight on pages 22 and 23, obviously that's important to the council as a material consideration, what they've said, and as a statutory consultee as well. But we wanted to balance it with some of the other considerations that you've heard from the support today, but also that you've heard from the objectors in making your decision on this. On pages 22 and 23, it highlights also that it's an opportunity to regularise an access that's been used historically for quite a lot of time, potentially improve some aspects of the safety, which would be turning properly to egress onto the main road there, both of which are unclassified roads. There's historic arrangements as well, such as the sewage plant and the likely permitted development of the use of the access, and also the lawful use of the access, which we've put in the paper as something to be taken into consideration. And you can attach what weight you see fit to that. We've also got the previous planning permission and how we dealt with that. We've looked at the speeds of the road around the area and the cars. The fact that we felt there was fairly good visibility between pedestrians and the use of the access, and quite good visibility and low speeds in that area in general. And you can balance that with the concerns of the residents and what their experiences are of that access. In addition, the one additional dwelling we would consider would have a very low trip generation. There is no licence that's been applied for in respect of the upgrade of the access, but then the county council, despite years of views, haven't done anything about that either. And so looking at the safety concerns cited, we do feel it's for members to balance that, as we have done, and fallen on the side of recommending approval for this. So I hope that gives a little bit of detail as to why we recommended what we have, but it's certainly a lot of issues to attach what weight to and then weigh them up and make your decision there. Thank you.
Yes, but isn't there a national standard that we have to comply with? And that standard says that we shouldn't have access onto junctions.
There isn't a national standard, it's each case on its own merits, and you would look at trip generation and the specifics of the characteristics of the area and weigh up what sort of visibility you think is appropriate. And well, I've seen appeal decisions recently where an inspector has sort of literally sat on the site and thought, I can see very clearly there's very, very little use of an area. And that will be relevant for us to assess it in this case, but there's no specific standard.
And the second point, yeah, I have another point as well, which I'd like to raise on this particular report.
One more point, thank you.
We're looking at the parking on that, and I thought the standard was for both the properties would be for 2 cars in each position. We're only showing one for number 1 Catway now. So how are we going to address that problem?
One of the factors to weigh into this is that these houses have been sort of accessed by pedestrians only for quite some time, so there isn't always a need for new parking. As we heard yesterday as well, the direction of travel is to move away from parking spaces. So it is again, there are standards that we can apply as we see appropriate in the situation. So these are not big houses. Providing some parking is sort of over and above the 0 parking that there is at the moment.
Okay, any more questions on the report? No? I've got a question. It's a very small house in a very small garden. Are we not trying to put too much into that? Well, it may be larger than the other gardens, but none of the gardens are particularly large. I'm just concerned that we are looking at overdevelopment of this site.
Well, through the assessment of it, as there's been constant discussion with manager, and sort of through that we felt it wasn't because of the overdevelopment of the site, and say just given the scale which the plot originally had, it felt that the size of dwelling proposed could fit within that plot whilst not being overdevelopment.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, members? No? Debate. Councillor Laney.
I must admit, I'm very unhappy with this particular report. I feel that not enough detail has been given to us on the access, which contravenes what I believe is the national standard. Port Lane is used quite extensively by a lot of traffic coming in from Oliver's Battery and Badger Farm during the day for work at IBM, etc. So it's not the minor road that people consider. And I think it's severely overdevelopment and the wrong materials have been suggested. Therefore, I shall be not agreeing with the officer.
Well, if there's nobody else, yeah, Councillor Gordon-Smith, thank you.
I'm sure other people who've been on the planning committee for some time will have heard one of the main objections to practically any development is traffic and the generation of traffic, stated by members of the public and so on, and it's a universal complaint. However, one very rarely hears an adverse comment from Hampshire Highways on access and traffic issues. And in many previous cases, you hear, people are quite surprised that Hampshire Highways have allowed access. And here we have a case when they have said they're raising an objection to it. And it seems to me a very serious point. I would also say, in terms of the materials on the building, I mean, it's quite a good design for what it is, I think, and it fits in with other buildings in Hursley. It doesn't match the adjacent buildings, but how often do you get that in Hampshire, quite frankly? But I think the traffic access point is very critical, and the fact that Hampshire have raised an objection, which in my experience is very rare, that we need to take due notice of it and turn down this proposal.
Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Chair. The points have been covered to a degree. I too am concerned that here we are, Hampshire have given their information to us and they are against it, yet we seem to think that we can overturn Hampshire, like Councillor Gordon Smith. For years I've sat on this committee when Hampshire County Council had not supported the local knowledge. Here we are trying to overturn Hampshire County Council, which I think is wrong. It's not only coming out where it is, it's coming out on a T-junction, literally on a T-junction, which to anybody who drives a car is absolutely silly, quite honestly. And again, Chairman, we've got a landscaping issue. We've got no recommendations on how they're going to protect the trees, because there will be a root infestation there, I guess, as well. Yet we've been asked to pass a planning application which doesn't give us that protection. I think this one is ill sought out. I cannot be supporting the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Any other contributions? Yes, I also, I'm afraid, cannot support the officer recommendation here. I've visited the site, looked at it from the road, looked at the lane, looked at the access. Clearly, that drop curb is just there for the pavement. And the fact that the house owners previously have been driving over the pavement and into the old lane that they've appropriated with the house, that was access to an old sewage plant, whatever. Occasionally, fine, you know, that's happened and there's nothing we can do about this historically, although I suspect that it should have been objected to. All the other houses along there, it makes a very attractive collection, little crescent of 6 former council houses in a very rural area, a quiet lane, but well used, I think. That footpath is used for access to the other houses, none of which have drive access to the front of them. They're all accessed by, they park at the bottom and there are steps up, or they use the path in front of this number 1. I think that putting an extra house in there, although there is access, there is an existing permission for an extension and access to a garage, that does not equate to access to 2 dwellings, let alone the actual construction that would be involved in putting in a new house. It's a rural unspoiled woodland verge along the side, and I agree that those trees would be threatened by this development. I think it's out of character, overdevelopment of the site. I think that we should take note of the highways objection, and I'm afraid I can't support the officer recommendation either. Are there any more contributions to debate, members? No? Okay, we will go to the vote then. So the officer recommendation is to approve this application. Can I see those in favour of approving the application? And those against? That's all members. So now we need to come up with some planning reasons. And I would like to turn to Lorna Hutchins, our advisor, who has been listening to the debates and hopefully can come up with some legitimate reasons for refusal.
Thank you, Chair. I have listened to the debate and it's very clear the concerns that you have in respect of the highway safety. I think the character with the design of the property and the way that it's laid out and also its impact on the trees. I would suggest there wasn't anything else I think that's come out of the debate. In that respect, then I would suggest and recommend that we have a separate reason for refusal in relation to highways, which would read as follows. The proposal is contrary to Local Plan Part 1 CP10, which is our highways policy, and also Local Plan Part 2, which is DM18, which is our policy in respect of new accesses, as it fails to provide satisfactory vehicular access by utilising a pedestrian access with inadequate visibility space and is therefore harmful to highway and pedestrian safety. So that's one I've written down. And then I would recommend a secondary refusal reason whereby the proposal is contrary to DM15 and DM16 and point 1 of DM17, which are our design and sort of character policies in Local Plan Part 2. There will also be aspects of high quality places as well that further support this, which I can agree later on which parts of that is. And I would recommend that I set these out in full if you agree them in principle before we issue a decision, if they're accepted. And so based on it being contrary to policy, I would recommend that we say it does not respond to the character of the area for reasons of siting, design and its compact layout in respect to the proximity of the trees and the pedestrian footway, and therefore it's harmful to the amenities of the area.
Thank you.
There is one more. There's because it would need a legal agreement to secure a package of treatment and mitigation for phosphates. They did manage to bring that forward in this respect, that we've got a standard reason for refusal of that as well. So that would be a third reason for refusal.
All right, members. So with those reasons for refusal before you, we are now recommending. So can I see all those in favour of those reasons for refusal, please? And any against? No, that's all members. Thank you very much. Right, we now move on to item number 8 on your agenda. There will just be a slight pause whilst we change the presenting officer. Okay, everybody, are we ready? Yes. Okay, item number 8 on your agenda is reference number 22018882 FUL, the Medical Centre, Friarsgate, Winchester. And our presenting officer is Robert Green. Robert, if you'd like to give us your presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. First, to start with the location of the site shown here outlined in red, you can see the existing footprint of the building in dark grey. To the north, we have residential dwellings, which also to the east and to the west. We have St Clement Surgery here. This is the large area opened by the bus station, and you have Busket Yard being shown by my mouse now. You can see the waterway, which goes through the site in blue. And you also see the area outlined in blue to the right here, which is owned by the applicant and is the area for bat relocation. Just to highlight the site surroundings, the listed buildings are shown here in pink with the green dots, so you can see the relationship there. You have the main River Itchen waterway to the right of the image, which at this point is a special area of conservation and SSSI. You can see non-designated heritage assets shown by the orange dot. So you have the Winchester bus station sign, Wall Staplers Hall, and the nutshell off of the image there, and a small right of way just to the far right. But bear in mind that this entire image is the Winchester Conservation Area. Moving that image to an aerial photograph so you can see those features more clearly. And Chair, the proposal is to demolish the Friarsgate Medical Centre building and in its place construct an area of public space. I will take you through each section of the proposal in more detail later in the presentation, but first I'd like to start with the demolition of the building itself. And I'll show you some photos of that. This is the view from Friarsgate looking east, so 20 to 27 Eastgate, the listed buildings to the rear of the building here. You can see the hoardings which have been constructed around the entirety of the site. This is an image looking toward the bus station before the hoardings were erected, so you can see the views of the Guildhall, Wall Staplers Hall and the Cathedral. And moving to the other side of the building, again on Friarsgate looking towards Coybury House, you can see the building there on the left. Chair, following assessment, it's been determined that the existing building is not of architectural or historical significance and its demolition is justified. Given the location within a conservation area, it's important and also governed by policy DM28 that the replacement proposal is secured so we're not left with large undeveloped gaps within the conservation area. The applicant has proposed a public space with an area of archaeological interest, and I'll zoom into each section to talk you through that in more detail. First, the western section of the site, which contains the archaeological dig site. This is surrounded by hoardings, shown there by the pink line, for security purposes, and we have a condition included to ensure that they are treated, and also that there are windows to allow views into that area. In this area, there is also a seating area on the south of the site there, a ramp, steps from Buskett Yard and area for a coffee van or a retail unit that would come and go up the ramp. Moving to the centre of the site, you can see that the floor plate of the existing building is being used to form the basis for the space. This middle section contains planting in the middle and a physic garden here. There's also 4 posts which can be used for displaying things such as bunting or any features. And there's also painting on the slab level as well, just to show the direction of the waterway beneath the site. The green areas you see here are either grass or additional wildflower planting. Moving on to the eastern section, this is the area which is planned to be used for events and to host the temporary exhibition vehicles for the archaeological area. Again, the green you see here is wildflower planting with the logs along the Friarsgate roadway. We also have trees and vegetation in planters throughout the site, a slightly raised platform for events and areas for artwork. The light blue line you see here are hoardings, which again, there is a condition to secure the mural that is planned for these hoardings, and they are also illuminated from the top. There is also a condition which ensures that the hoardings are set back by 11 metres to cover this distance, and that's to prevent the hoardings protruding out toward the road and to allow views to the listed building as well. Chair, this isn't in your pack, but I thought it was useful to add the lighting plan. So we have 4 6-metre posts at 1, 2, 3 and 4, and a number of low-level lighting throughout the site, and the hoarding I mentioned earlier is lit by LED strip lighting from the top. These are some of the concept images that have been supplied by the applicant to show the inspiration for the drawings, and that includes the time truck archaeological idea, the platform, and an idea of some of the seating, and also just a demonstration of the hoardings with the windows and the type of planting which is being proposed on the site. Moving on to photos of the site now, going beyond the hoardings, you can see the direction of the photo taken down here, and I've just included the proposed plan as well, so you can compare the two. This is the entrance to the building. Jumping across the waterway to look back toward that last photo point, and a greater view of the waterway which goes through the site and divides at this point. Closer look at the area proposed for the archaeological dig site, and looking between the 2 buildings toward the bridge over the waterway, and back toward the entrance of the site over the waterway, This is taken under the Undercroft parking area, looking towards St John's North at the rear and the rear properties of Eastgate Street here. And views of the alleyway between the application site and 20 to 27 Eastgate. So you can see the wall and the change in levels there. This is from the car park looking toward St John's North and jumping over that wall to look back in the same direction back at the existing building. Some more views from that outdoor space for St John's North. So you'd have demolition of the building here and the central portion of the site here with the planting and the Physic Garden. I'm moving to the rest of the open space for St John's North, so I'm now to the other side of the building. Again, looking to the central portion of the site here with the planting and the Physic Garden. Another view of that area with the central portion of the site on the left. Some further views from that open space. And moving back onto the site, we're now at the rear of the site, so you can see Wallstaplers Hall in the background. This is the area proposed for the seating and the coffee van food truck. And the view that would be opened up showing there Guildhall, Wallstaplers Hall, and from some angles the cathedral, which is behind the Wallstaplers in that image. Finally, some internal photos of the building in its current position. Officer's recommendation is for approval of the application. That concludes the presentation, Chair.
Thank you very much, Robert. Okay, we now move to contributions from members of the public, and we have two objectors. We have Ian Tate and Richard Baker from the City of Winchester Trust. Now, you should all members have received an email from the City of Winchester Trust with their full contribution. Okay. So if Ian Tate and Richard Baker would like to come forward, please. You have 3 minutes between you. Have you agreed how you're going to share those 3 minutes? Lovely. Okay, well, I'll leave it up to you then. Just the timer won't start until you start speaking, so you can switch your microphone. Whichever's speaking first. Thank you, Mr. Tate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address the Planning Committee. I wish to object in the strongest terms to the proposals to demolish the Friarsgate surgery pending the meanwhile use, whatever that means. This is an utter disgrace, and what Winchester residents want is action here, not dither and delay. Back on the 11th of December 2014, this committee considered and approved a comprehensive scheme to redevelop central Winchester. However, due to the antics of the Winchester Deserves Better group, the scheme was scuppered, and to this day, essentially nothing has happened. I spoke at that meeting supporting the proposals, as did Richard Baker for the Trust and councillors Rutter, Pearson and Reid, who were on the Planning Committee, voted in favour. I have consistently and vigorously argued that this element of the Central Winchester Regeneration Scheme could come forward immediately as a separate planning application and be approved and built out straight away with no need to wait for the rest of the scheme to be agreed. This is a very prominent site in Winchester and deserves a landmark building, not the current semi-derelict structure or some low-level street furniture. I'm often challenged by residents over why nothing has happened here. 8.5 years has elapsed. St John's Winchester Charity are the adjoining landowner, and I know that they would be very interested in partnering the council for a residential scheme where they would deliver the affordable housing element. And I've presented that to Cabinet a number of times. Please refuse this planning application and demand that before the old surgery is demolished, the council comes forward with a scheme for housing on the site. Block J was residential in the 2014 scheme. This could be done very quickly if there's a will to do so within the administration. Please don't wait 8 years to do something. Winchester deserves the development now. Thank you.
Good morning. The public speaking arrangement for this committee may be clearly established, but they are highly unsatisfactory when objectors have different grounds for their objection as is the case with this application. The Trust strongly recommend that these arrangements be reviewed in this situation. On Monday evening, I sent to members of this committee a copy of the Trust statement because I did not want to represent the Trust here this morning with a soundbite. The statement sent you ended with the phrase, "Thank you for your time. Your arrangements for speaking have denied me time and allow for proper engagement in the democratic process. Thank you."
Well, the chair does have some leeway, so I will give you another minute to contribute to this debate. If you would like to say give us more of your reasons for objecting. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Chairman. These were set out in the letter, as I said, sent you to committee, all members of the committee. With the appointment of the council of the development partner, there is the prospect of proposals for regenerating the central area being developed, but there is no guarantee at the moment that they will be delivered. And we come from a history going back to 1996 of trying to regenerate this area. So there is a risk in assuming that if Friarsgate Medical Centre is demolished, that there is going to be a good replacement building, which we sincerely hope there is. Removal of the building will open the foreground across the waste ground east of the bus station and see the rear of the properties in the Broadway, which is not one of our most spectacular views. There is no condition survey of any depth to say that the medical centre is in a derelict condition, and the policy clearly states that if you...
It's the end of your minute.
Right, thank you.
But thank you very much. I'm sorry about the extra noise that we're experiencing. We will just pause for a minute and shut the windows and see if that helps. Thank you.
It's all hazardous, is it?
Deja vu though.
Right, sorry about that. Okay, so we now move to our next public speaker. Oh yes, sorry, I beg your pardon. Members may have questions of clarification for our first speakers. Do we have any questions, members, to Mr. Tate or Richard Baker from the Winchester Trust? No, you may return to your seat. Thank you very much. We have no parish council representative or ward councillor. We have a supporter, Stuart Pegham. You'd like to come forward, Mr. Pegham? We also have Lydia with you, who is available to answer questions, I believe, also registered to speak. Thank you. So you have 3 minutes. The timing will start when you start speaking, so you can switch your microphone on anytime. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much. My name is Stuart Pegham and I work in the Estates Department of the Council. And I'm the project manager for this particular intervention in the Central Winchester site. This is our third project. As meanwhile use, our first is the use of Quibbury House, where we've got some living guardians. The second you'll see right now is Central Winchester regeneration of the King's Walk Shopping Parade, where we're on site. This particular application is our third intervention as a meanwhile use. As noted by the planning officer, The building is really not suitable for regeneration. It's in very, very poor condition. Therefore, our proposal is to demolish. As again noted, as we're in the conservation area, we are required to put something back. Over the past 2 years, we've been through some extensive design work and reviews, create what we see as a public interim space. In this latest iteration, we've added in the additional piece of an architectural dig to complement the other architectural work carrying out on the site. To the point raised earlier about timing, the meanwhile use is designed for a period of 18 months, 18 months to 2 years, during which, of course, that time, the wider generation plans will come forward. And as noted, the council has just recently appointed a development partner. I don't think there's anything else to say, to be honest. I'm quite happy with that.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for Mr. Peam or for his assistant? Councillor Gordon-Smith.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch. You said the meanwhile use might run for up to 2 years. Right, thank you. Sorry, because I can get a lot of din from here. Thank you.
Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Winchester City, like most other cities, there's an element of antisocial behavior, vandalism and graffiti. I have concerns about the fact that we're going to be opening up another area of space for the public to enjoy. And enjoyment is what I want to see. However, there's nothing in the papers at all in relation to CCTV. Coverage of the area is required, I think. Can you give me some indication as to what your thoughts are on that?
Thank you. The existing building is subject to a fair amount of attack under antisocial behaviour, as I'm sure you know, and you've seen the pictures of the interior. During the course of the design process, we had a consultation with the police and with our own internal team who look after antisocial behaviour. Lighting is designed to provide a safer space. There is no specific fixed CCTV on these drawings, but the council has recently started to deploy mobile CCTV. And we have provision here to drop those reusable cameras onto the site as they move around various other council sites. If that doesn't prove to be sufficient, those cameras can be left permanently on site. They don't require any power connections or any data connections. They operate mobilely. We've got a number up on trial at the moment.
So are you saying that those mobile CCTV units will definitely be deployed?
Yes, they will, on rotation with a number of other sites where we're trialling them at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of clarification? No? Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chairman. You really must look a little further left.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Reid, sorry.
Chairman, if I may, you heard the previous speaker from the trust, Winchester Trust, about the state of the buildings. You're a suitably qualified person, I suspect, to tell us what in your mind those buildings are like, these derelict buildings.
Yes, correct. I've been in and out of it many, many times. It's been completely destroyed by various people who broke in over time. The actual construction of it we consider to be not suitable for refurbishment or regeneration. The wider central Winchester regeneration scheme includes some quite important provisions for paths and walkways and riverside views, and keeping it and trying to refurbish it would be very contradictory to those plans. So I'm very confident the building is not suitable to be retained and converted.
If I may, the external appearance of the building?
I think external appearance is very much a personal view. I drive past it every day and I can't wait to see it gone, quite honestly. I think it's a complete eyesore.
You may have a vested interest.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Sorry about that. Any other questions, members? No? Thank you very much. You may return to your seats. Thank you. Okay, Robert, do you have any extra points you'd like to make following those contributions?
Nothing to add, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, members. It is a long report, but I'm happy to take questions on any element of it. Councillor Reid.
Eyes left. Thank you, Chair. Could I ask why this is a very important site? In the past, I think it was 2009, when this first started, the planning committee walked the site in order to appreciate it. We have new members on the committee now who have probably never even set foot on the site. Can I ask why a preemptive visit wasn't scheduled for this one? If not, then maybe we ought to have a site visit to view the site. This is very important for the future development in general for this particular area.
Chair, when we consider preemptive site visits, we would normally be looking for requests to be made to us. We didn't receive any requests, but notwithstanding that, we would consider that most of this site is easily visible from the public realm, apart from the very sort of central area, and so there wouldn't necessarily be a need for a public for a preemptive site visit.
Okay, are you proposing a site visit, Councillor Reid?
I think it's only fair on all the membership to be able to view the site with the officer to give a clear detail on it.
Do you have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Laming. Okay, members, we are proposed to have a site visit before we finally make a decision on this. Can I see those in favour of a site visit? 3 members. And those against? 6 members. Okay, thank you. I think that's turned down. Right. Any more questions on the report, please? Questions of clarification on the report. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. It seems to me that there are 2 things woven through this report. One is around the demolition and future uses of the building or building site. And the second is the archaeology. And I confess I'm not entirely clear, and so I'm seeking your clarification of, in essence, the timeline in which building and landscaping works and archaeological investigations will come together.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you are correct. It is a report of 2 halves, started with the demolition, and as I said, being in the conservation area, we need to secure that replacement proposal. If I turn to the conditions, I think I'm happy to talk through the archaeology ones as well, which I think would be useful. I think condition 2 is also important because that as part of policy DM28, prior to the commencement of demolition, that asks for proof that the contracts have been let out to tender for the replacement development. That gives us as the planning authority security that the building will be demolished and its replacement will come in an appropriate time frame. So we do have that security there. Turning to archaeology, I appreciate this is a bit different because normally we just have one condition with a written scheme of investigation. In this case, that has been bespoke and it's been split. So if I talk members through with the numbers, we start with condition 12. That's the general condition that we always see. That covers the site in its entirety for any work such as fence posts or digging, which may go below ground. That's the catching condition to say that if the applicant is undertaking those works, written scheme of investigation, how is it dealt with? That condition 13 follows on from that. In case condition 12 is enacted, then that obtains all the information. We then move to condition 14, which focuses just on the archaeological dig site. And again, that sets it at a different time frame, but gives the planning authority security that comes in good time. So we've said within 3 months of the completion of the demolition, and just for clarity prior to any works in that dig site, we need that written scheme of investigation, which we'll assess with our archaeologist. And then moving on to 16 as well, with the different element of introducing those educational events and then the public interaction with the archaeological dig site. Condition 16 asks for details of that, and that covers the lifetime of the interim development as well. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And you want to come back, Councillor Edwards?
Thank you. I'm still, I think, seeking further clarity, specific clarity about the timing of the archaeological works in relation to the demolition of the building. And I suppose what I'm looking for is some reassurance that the demolition process, if it came before the archaeology, would not pose a risk to any existing archaeological remains.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There is another condition as well, which I perhaps should have started with to deal with demolition exactly. So we have had a demolition method statement which focuses just on the demolition of the building itself, which has been assessed by our archaeologists, and provided that those rules are followed, then no adverse harm is found. There is a requirement, it's under condition 6 from memory. Yes, condition 6. There is a requirement to update that method statement slightly following the revisions of the plan. But what we will have under condition 6 is that confirmation that prior to any demolition, we know that they're following that agreed method statement. And then the other conditions that I mentioned come in line, are triggered after that point.
Yeah. Councillor Ashwell, then Councillor Reid, and then Councillor Laming. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. During the demolition, could you just explain how we would be protecting the river?
Thank you, Chair. The applicant has submitted an ecological impact assessment, which goes into the initial details of that protection. That includes measures such as contaminant spillage, covering the river in netting, any dust suppression. So that is conditioned, but also on standard procedure, but also on the advice of Natural England, we have secured a construction environmental management plan, which really goes into that detail further. That's prior to any works on the site, so we'll have that agreed with Natural England Environment Agency before any demolition occurs, and the aim of that is to protect the river, which is important.
Thank you.
Yes, whatever order I said it in. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to condition number 18, I note that it's 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, Monday to Saturday. It is not normal that Saturday is counted as a full day. It usually is a 1 p.m. on Saturdays. For what reason is it being extended to 6 p.m?
Thank you, Chair. The condition was recommended by our Environmental Health Officer, and obviously the point of the space is it captures those archaeological events as well and potential one-off events. Obviously, due to the size of the site, it's not, it's not large. We're not talking large crowds of people where you may introduce those noise disturbance, and we also have to consider the current location of the site being in an urban environment where you have that interaction already. So I've just followed the guidance of the Environmental Health Officer there, who looked at this from a noise disturbance perspective.
Secondly, if I may, Chair, I've read through the report, and unless I've missed it, reading it at 5 o'clock in the morning, I've not seen anything about a construction traffic plan. This is a one-way system, and it's something that we identified back in 2008 that there was going to be a problem with construction traffic on a one-way system. But I see no plan for dealing with construction traffic.
Robert?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just reviewing the condition. That is something which is usually provided in by condition 8, which is the construction management plan. I'm just reading through now, just in case there are any specific requests for it. So We do have an element on that, so details of parking for operatives and traffic management measures. So we will obtain that detail when we get the details of the construction management plan.
That's on page 79, members.
Thank you, Chair. I did miss that, but nonetheless, it brings out the fact that we've not really mentioned it
An
properly,
important
and we're
issue.
being asked to agree something without knowing that traffic plan.
The officers will look at it, and I'm sure if there's any concerns, we'll come back to the chair. Right. Councillor Leaming.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to pre-commencement, item 6, where we're talking about the archaeology. We do know that there is probably some interest in archaeology in that area after the ground penetrating survey that was done around St Clement's and Coitbury House. So is there a reason why we can't have that survey done prior to demolition? It doesn't take very long and it won't hold up works, but it will give us a clear idea of the archaeology that is possibly there. And we can take preventive measures to make sure that it's looked after.
Thank you, Chair. So the aspect of the scheme for demolition, and as I mentioned there, the slab of the building is used as the basis. So demolition is the roofs, the walls to take it down to the slab level. So what the method statement goes into detail on is that there aren't any intensive works, which go below ground. Again, we have got the following conditions, which have their bespoke triggers, where if that did happen, if there was any event where there is below ground works, it's also caught by that. But condition 6 just manages it down to the demolition of the slab to allow the rest of the works to commence.
Yes, basically it's just a safeguard before we start, so we know where areas that we might have to protect on that. Can I come back to the supplementary when we start talking about the biodiversity area, and I want to go on to the water channels after that. When we talk about regeneration and any new plans, we'll have
Could you
to
just indicate which page you're on, please, Councillor Leaming? so
I'm
we
back
can
on
find
page 74.
74.
So we're looking at the environmental aspect of it. We ask for an increase in biodiversity on any site that we do. So on this particular site, if we're going to make it into public realm, when we come to build again, do we increase the biodiversity again by 10%? So you're looking at a 20% increase over the whole site.
Thank you, Chair. I can't find the precise parts of the report, but I will get there. So yes, there is the biodiversity net gain requirement. It doesn't come into legislation until later this year, but the applicant has provided, I think from memory, it's a 23.8% biodiversity net gain based on habitat units. I think moving forward, any applications on this site in the future as part of regeneration plans, they will have to look into biodiversity net gain. They will have to look in where the baseline comes from. So I'm not able to discuss what future applications may or may not come with us. So that will be assessed at the time.
I think we need to be happy with the 23, whatever it is, point.
Yeah. Then we go on page 75 where we're talking about sustainability. Now, this particular area has waterway going through it, and that is an important part of the flood control system for the city. So therefore, we've got to ensure that we don't block it in any shape or form. And we also find out if there's any culverts that we don't know about, because this whole area is covered with culverts that we know about, but there are also suspicions that we have several others around which could date back to Roman times. That's another reason why I asked for the ground penetrating radar survey on this. We've got to be very careful on the waterways through the city, because we don't want to exacerbate any flooding risk.
If I could add as well, Chair, a requirement of applications within this area are to submit flood risk statements or assessments, which has looked into those matters, and it's determined that it's not a residential use, a sensitive use, so it's not sensitive to flooding and it doesn't worsen the flooding situation. That's been agreed with the Environment Agency and the local flood authority as well at the County Council. Thank you.
Any further questions, members? No? Okay, debate. Who would like to start the debate? Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. This appears to be on the surface a very worthwhile exercise. Friarsgate has been a blight on the city for some considerable time, and something needs to be done with it. I think that this is a reasonably good short-term measure to look after the site and give the city some things that it could do with. And it's part of the whole site which is up for regeneration, and we need to be bold over the whole process, but we need to get a move on with it. And I think the first stage of knocking down Friarsgate is probably a very good thing. So I should be for this particular application.
Yes, and I'd like to congratulate the officers on a very thorough report. We've looked into this completely thoroughly, and as with all city council applications coming to planning committee through the planning process, it just requires 2 objections to trigger it coming to planning committee as opposed to the 6 that would normally be required. So there's been very little actually objection to this, other than those that we have heard. So many thanks to our officers. It's been a long, hard slog. I, for one, will be very pleased to see the back of those buildings. And we look forward to an exciting regeneration of the city in due course, and that's being done elsewhere. Okay, Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Thank you. I was reassured by the officer about the length of the meanwhile use. I mean, that is one of the problems, is you take the building out and then nothing happens. But we're talking, being reassured it's going to be a 2-year limit for this. You can, when you come up with these temporary uses, become a victim of your own success. And during the exploration around the central Winchester, I visited a site in Bristol, and that's become, there's a temporary site there, it's become so successful, there's a sort of movement against moving it on. I think we have to recognise the problem of antisocial behaviour, but the best antidote to that is to create a place that the people come to and pass through to and along routes into the city centre, and that's the best way of stopping it becoming a haunt of cider drinkers and so on. Hopefully the archaeological site will provide a focus of interest there. I accept the criticism by the Winchester City Trust about the jumble of materials, and I think that might be improved upon. However, of course, these the seating and the tree planting, all the rest of it, is all of a temporary nature and can be moved around. So there's some scope for improvement. I think if we can take as much hoarding out as possible and rather have terrace fencing or grills so there's more visibility rather than just looking through windows. I think the problem with waiting and coming up with a planning application for the site is that you're then creating a sort of piecemeal approach when we're actually waiting for Jigsaw to produce a master plan and an overall scheme for the site. And we have to be very careful you don't preclude what might be a great opportunity at a later date. And I think also it seems to be rather the opposite of dither and delay. It seems to be this would be a psychological step forward. You're getting rid of the building and suddenly there's a bit of Winchester that's opened up to public access, and the bit that the public haven't been able to look at close to the river, it becomes available. And I think this could set a very useful pattern for developing public use of the space, which is in line with what Jigsaw are trying to produce for the future of walkways along rivers, along the hidden rivers and so on. So I'm for this demolition.
Thank you. Any further contributions?
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, I'd totally forgotten this actually went back to 1996, when I probably sat in this position at that point in time then. In 2008, we toured the site as members to look at, to see exactly what was being offered and what effect we think it may have on the community. The actual structure of the Friarsgate Medical Centre is in a poor state of repair, which has been confirmed. It is not an architectural gem. It's a late 1960s, early 1970 concrete block. And who knows what's going to go with that, such as asbestos. What is nice about this is the fact that we can actually now start some archaeology. This has been a topic of conversation since 2008, when we think we know what's below there. We're not terribly sure. The Victorian era will have possibly damaged a lot of that, but nonetheless, we'll be able to get firsthand. I understand that we still are not terribly sure where the Roman baths were. So once again, who knows, we may be in for a nice surprise. Yes, it's nice to see this project starting to move forward at long last. The only thing that worried me was the lack of a travel plan that we as members could view, because there was a lot of residential property around the area. And whilst archaeology doesn't make a vast amount of noise, demolition does. And that was my reasoning for the Saturday afternoon element. We're only giving the residents of that locality 1 day's grace. I can see no reason to refuse this application and look forward to seeing it get underway.
Hope it happens quickly and then they won't have to put up with too much noise on Saturdays. They do live in the city after all. Any more contributions? Oh yes, Councillor Lee.
Yes, I'd like to echo some of the sentiments that have already been articulated, particularly Councillor Gordon Smith's comments. I mean, this is a demonstrable step forward towards the regeneration. It's signposting what the future needs to be. I think the biodiversity net gain in the meanwhile status has got to be a positive. Taking away visual eyesores can only be a good thing. So I'll wholeheartedly support the proposal.
Thank you. I think that's all contributions. So this application is recommended for approval. Can I see all those in favour of the recommendation, please? That's all members. Okay, thank you. So that is approved. We'll now take just over a 17-minute break, return at 11:15. Thank you. Members, if you'd like to take your seats, please. Thank you. Right, we now return to our agenda, and we are now at item number 9, which is reference 2202-074 FUL, Forest View, Thursley Road, Denmead. The presenting officer is Robert Green, with Jordan Wiseman at his shoulder until he gets called away to fight fires. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Starting with the application site, just to provide some context, so you can just see the application site outlined in red here, and outlined in blue for the remainder of the site ownership. You have Thursley Road to the north there and off image, but the settlement of Denmead is off to the right there. So the application is for 3 tourist units to the rear of the existing house. So we have Thursley Road to the top, and access to the tourist units down here, and shared parking, and then pathways leading to the tourism units. This is the floor and roof plan of the tourism units. So they are comprised of 1 3-bed and 2 2-bed units, and a section of the building, and the elevations of the buildings. That's all 3 units you can see there. Moving on to site photographs, the top left is the view along Thursley Road. That's taken from the site access, which is to the right of the image. The top right is looking down the existing track from the entrance to the site. Bottom left is looking at the derelict buildings, which are to be demolished to make space for the tourism units. And the bottom right is the view from the access across the existing site. And a wider view of the existing vegetation to the boundaries with the golf course. So that image is looking northeast. So the officer's recommendation is for refusal of the application. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to public participation. We have no objector. We have a parish council representative from Denmead Parish Council, Councillor Kevin Andreoli. If you'd like to come forward, Mr. Andreoli. You know the routine, I think, and you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
If I could just apologise for the crashing earlier of my crutches before I start my presentation. Sorry about that.
Don't worry.
They are cumbersome things. You either trip people up or make a noise. Sorry. Okay. As you have heard from the officer, this application is for a single-storey building comprising 3 lodges for holiday accommodation in the Denmead designated gap. This application is in the Denmead gap and will unavoidably physically diminish the gap, contrary to policy CP18. As the policy states, within these areas, only development that does not physically or visually diminish the gap will be allowed, and development which would threaten the open and undeveloped character of this area will be resisted, and the land should be managed to secure the long-term retention of its rural character. As this site is development in the countryside, the policy MTRA 4 applies. The policy states, in the countryside, the local planning authority will only permit development which has an operational need for a countryside location, such as for agriculture, horticulture, or forestry. Tourist accommodation is not appropriate to the site, and the application has shown no operational need for a local worker accommodation. This site also does not conform to policy CP20, heritage and landscape character. The proposed development does not protect nor enhance the district's distinctive landscape and setting, neither does it relate to existing buildings in the surrounding countryside. This is contrary to the policy which states particular emphasis should be given to conserving local distinctiveness, especially in terms of characteristic materials, trees, built form, and layout, tranquility, sense of place and setting. And finally, policy CP13, a high quality design. The proposed building is utilitarian, a large single mass, and requires the removal of trees and shrubs. In the creation of a separate drive for access and large parking area, tree roots are at risk of damage. This is contrary to the policy which states any new development should demonstrate that the accompanying landscape framework has been developed to enhance both the natural and built environment and to maximise the potential to improve local biodiversity. Denmead Parish Council supports the officer's recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrioli. Members, do we have any questions for clarification for the Parish Council representative? No, you may return to your seat. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We have no ward councillor representation, so we move to the supporters. That's Ray Dudman and Ben Mugford. If you'd like to both come forward. You have 3 minutes between you. Have you agreed who is going to speak first? Yes. Just switch on the microphone when you're ready, and the timer will start when you start speaking, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for your time. I'm Ben, and I just want to say that we are not developers. We're just a young family who want to create something very much part of Denmead and in line with the countryside and local plan policy that offers sound tourist and environmentally sound tourist accommodation designed in keeping with the stables and barns in our area for people wanting to come and see all that Hampshire has to offer.
Yeah, members of the committee, the officers' report, the local plan and the Denmead neighbourhood plan all agree that the purpose of the settlement gap is to prevent the coalescence of the two settlements of Denmead and Waterlooville. The examiner of the Denmead plan and the inspector of the local plan observed that preventing two settlements from coalescing is not the same as preventing any development between them. This is endorsed in the Denmead plan itself, which states those buildings which currently exist in the Denmead gap will be allowed to make small alterations to their structure, provided that they do not compromise the integrity and nature of the gap. This proposal sits wholly within the boundary of a single residential property at the edge of the settlement gap in Denmead. The site is entirely surrounded by mature trees with dense vegetation, as shown by the photographs, and shares a boundary on two sides with a golf course. It is clearly not in the open countryside. The new building is ancillary to the existing residence, providing small-scale tourist accommodation, which will be managed and operated from the house itself. It is consistent with the policies of both the local plan and the Denmead plan, which encourage the development of small businesses in the community, even the rural community. In particular, the local plan endorses small-scale sites for low-key tourist accommodation where it's appropriate to the site, location and the setting. The building is a simple timber-clad construction, as the photographs show, designed to accord with the rural vernacular exemplified by the nearby barn and stables. It has excellent energy credentials, and since it will share its services with the existing property, also improves the sustainability of the site. The location and orientation of the building ensure that the existing trees can be retained, and only 3 poor quality trees, and those with ash dieback, are to be removed to help improve the overall health and diversity of the site. The report repeatedly suggests that simply being in the gap is sufficient reason for refusal. However, policy suggests that development will not be permitted only if it physically or visually diminishes the gap. Not possible to see the proposed building from outside the site. Indeed, even the existing buildings on the boundary which are to be demolished are virtually invisible. The report also assumes that anything built in the gap diminishes it. The 2 inspectors have said preventing two settlements from coalescing is not the same as preventing any development between them. Providing a small-scale building to accommodate a modest enterprise within the curtilage of an existing residence does not diminish the gap or enable the coalescence of the two settlements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for the applicant? No? If you could switch off the microphone. Sorry. And you may return to your seats now. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. That concludes, no, it doesn't. Yes, it does. That concludes the public speaking. Rob, Jordan, do you have anything you want to add following that?
Thank you, Chair. Just something I forgot to clarify if I go back to the plan is the Denmead settlement gap runs along Thursley Road, so it runs along just to the north of the image. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, members, we now move to questions on the report. And we'll take the whole report. So I have a question, if I may, which is that the applicants had some pre-application advice. Can you just explain why we've got to the stage of it coming to planning committee? Presumably that pre-app advice said this is outside policy.
Chair, in accordance with the National Planning Policy Framework, we do try to work positively with applicants. And whilst we were aware it was in the gap, it is important to try to facilitate sort of small business uses in where we can. However, ultimately, when we had to come down to the recommendation, we didn't find that the development would be in accordance with the gap and couldn't overcome the problems associated with that. That's set out for the sort of extensive policy reasons on page 120 and the report either side of it as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions, members, on the report? Questions of clarification? No questions? We move to debate then. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chairman. The Denmead Gap, well, in fact, it's called the Denmead Waterlooville Gap, has existed since 1983 because of the increasing possibility of urbanisation coming down from Waterlooville, of which partly you could say is the MDA, which is now being built out. So the gap itself is supported not only by the City Council, but also by Havant Borough Council and also Hampshire County Council. And it is a long-standing gap in order to ensure that there is a gap between the urban and the rural. So there's been a lot of thought behind it. In fact, in 1985, the parish council were offered over £1 million if they would relax the gap. They declined. So we still have the gap, and we still hopefully will defend the gap until such time as it becomes. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further contributions to debate? This application is recommended for refusal for the reasons set out in the report. Can I see all those in favour of that recommendation, please? That's 9, all members. So that application is refused. Sorry. Okay, we now move on to item number 10. There will be a short pause whilst we change around the presenting officer. Thank you. Have all our public speakers now. So we are at item number 10, 23000485 FUL at Eversley Park Recreation Ground in Kingsworthy. And the officer presenting is Megan Osborne. Over to you, Megan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Delay. The application site is located within Kingsworthy Village on existing recreation ground, and it is proposed in the same location as the existing play equipment on the recreation ground. The site is in the northwestern area of the rec ground and has dwellings to the north on Frampton Way and to the west on Holdaway Close. The proposal is to replace the play equipment on the site. The only bit that requires planning permission is the proposed tower. This is to the eastern side of the play area. The climbing equipment only needs permission because it exceeds 4 meters in height. The design includes the use of some blue and green panels, but overall the colour scheme is greys, blacks. The overall tower is approximately 5.1 meters in height. The highest platform on which a person could stand is 3 meters. Take you through some photos. So this is standing southern part of the recreation play area, and the houses you can see in front of you there are the houses on Holdaway Close, and the play tower would be to the east of the screen here. I don't think you can really see exactly where it would be. It's off the camera shot, and this is looking you'll see approximately to the right hand side of the screen where the tower is proposed, and this is looking north towards Frampton Way. It's concluded that development would not result in any harmful impact on the character of the surrounding area, nor would it result in any material planning harm on the surrounding residents. Therefore, this application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Megan. We now come to the public speaking. We have Patricia Dowdell. Hi, Patricia, come forward. You switch on the microphone. That's it. You have 3 minutes from when you start speaking, so please do take your time settling in.
Okay.
3 minutes, thank you.
Well, good morning. This won't take very long, I think. But I refer to the objections published online, and also I'd like to respond to some of the comments of the parish council because I find them a bit misleading. I want to emphasise, though, to begin, that all the objectors support a climbing frame in the playground, but they don't support the particular tower proposed by Kingsworthy Parish Council on 2 main points. Firstly, it impinges on the privacy and living space of neighbouring houses, and therefore the security. Secondly, its design and materials are inappropriate for the park location, out of keeping with the other equipment which has already been installed. So some of the comments I will refer to. My first point then is about privacy and overlooking. The council says there's a cluster of trees between the proposed tower and the majority of neighbouring properties, which is misleading because one house has no screening at all. The trees in question are all deciduous, which means for at least half the year they aren't a screen at all. And there would be an unobstructed view of some of the living spaces, mainly upstairs rooms, of 2 anyway, of some of the houses, and the gardens, so that would be more open to observation because of the height. They also mention that the highest platform a child could stand on is 3 meters. Well, this assumes that all the users are children, which is not necessarily the case, because the playground is open 24/7. After hours, older and larger individuals often use it, especially in the summer, and larger teenagers particularly play on the equipment. So And so in effect, anyone who cares to do so can climb the tower. And the Nextdoor website, it frequently warns us of thefts from sheds and garages in the area. So gratuitously providing an elevated observation point seems a bit irresponsible, you know, at the very least. And furthermore, I don't think that adding a few more polyurethane panels or screening would help significantly. Well, that's security, but my second point is about the appropriateness of the chosen tower. I quote the council: "The majority of the structure is made of metal, steel, and HDPE, high-density polyurethane plastic, both of which can be recycled, and the planning in Winchester said it's considered the proposed tower would not appear incongruous with this area of existing playground equipment. The height, mass and design is acceptable within the setting." Well, I absolutely disagree with that. The height and materials have visual impact which is out of keeping in a park environment, and the tower relates very poorly to the location.
I'm afraid that's the end of your 3 minutes. But members have questions, so we may be able to tease out a little more.
Can I just?
Do you have a sentence to finish?
Yes, well, I would just like to say the other 4 plans in the public consultation would have been much more appropriate and would have satisfied everyone, because there's never been a problem with the playground being there. Everyone's been perfectly happy with it. But this particular thing stands out and is a security risk, basically.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you've made your point. Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for Mrs. Dowdall? No? Yes, Councillor Lee.
Just curious to know, you mentioned some other options or proposals.
Well, yes.
Why was this one in particular?
Well, this is what I have asked them, and they've just said they have a very complicated matrix of requirements. The public consultation was only 20%, counted 20%. The other 4 options that came in the public consultation were all lower. They were all wooden, much more appropriate to the park and the surroundings. And yet, for some reason, they've chosen something this high, covered in polystyrene cladding, which is okay.
Any more questions? Thank you very much. If you could switch off the microphone and return to your seat.
I'm sorry.
If you could just, that's it, and return to your seat. Thank you very much. Thank you. Our next contributor is from the Parish Council, and that is Councillor Colin Cosburn. If you'd like to come forward, Colin. The microphone is switched on using the button at the bottom, and the 3 minutes that you have will start when you start speaking. Thank you.
Good morning. We ask that this committee support our application for a play tower at Eversley Park, Kingsworthy. This tower represents the final part of a major refurbishment of our principal play area within the parish and is the only item of equipment that requires planning consent. To my knowledge, the play area has existed in this location for the 40+ years that I have lived in the parish. Following a major tender process, the scheme proposed was scored the highest by the majority of parishioners attending the consultation sessions organised by our council. 5 schemes were put forward for parish consultation, and each was also rated by the parish council for compliance with national play area standards and sustainability. The reviewing committee also placed this scheme first. It's been stated this tower is too high at 5.1 metres, but as the drawings accompany our application indicate, this is the overall height of the tower's pointed roof and flagpole. The highest a child can climb is 3 metres, which is approximately 1 metre less than the rope pyramid that it replaces. Our drawing also shows that care was taken on the siting of the tower to lessen its impact on residents for reasons of child safety. The main slide that the tower gives access to has been positioned so it faces east, thus reducing solar heat on the slide, but also to ensure that users climb the tower with their back towards the nearest buildings. To reduce overlooking of the nearest houses, the tower has also been repositioned to be behind a group of trees, which admittedly are deciduous at this point. And the existing rope tower was actually to the south of the existing site and therefore did not benefit from the tree belt that we've moved this tower behind. The issue of safety has been raised and antisocial behaviour, but I can assure this committee that only equipment and contractors who can meet the latest national safety standards were considered for this work. In addition, the final scheme will be subject to a full inspection by a ROSPA approved inspection company prior to its commissioning. We also, as a responsible parish council, undertake weekly inspection with our own ROSPA trained maintenance man. The question was raised by the other people regarding the why we chose this one, and I can answer that if any of the councillors have questions for that. But we believe we've taken all necessary steps to reduce the impact on residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do members have any questions of clarification? Councillor Laming.
Thank you. Could you tell us how far this tower is from the nearest property?
I believe it's over 30 metres, nearer 40 metres.
Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
Just picking up on your point about the orientation with respect to the properties, i.e. privacy. I'm looking at the structure. Are you saying that that particular side is pretty much solid? It's not going to be viewing points which might upset residents?
Certainly. The main slide is actually 50% of its length is tubular. So anyone entering the slide is in basically a tunnel and can't see out until they get 50% down the slide.
Councillor Reid.
Could I ask the average age of the use of the for the children, that is? Certainly the specification we had was that we wanted it for use for children who, from the time they could start toddling up until the age of 12. After that, the park has got equipment for older children farther away from any habitation.
Councillor Gordon-Smith.
I wonder if I might ask you, are there instances of older children or teenagers engaging in antisocial behaviour on this site?
Unfortunately, like all parishes, yes, teenagers do have antisocial behaviour in various parts of the village. One of the schemes which initially we thought would be far better in that it was a much lower fort construction actually had a very large diameter tunnel underneath it, which we thought would be an absolute magnet for illicit drinking, sex, drug taking potentially.
Too much information. Okay, any further questions? Thank you very much. You may return to your seat. Thank you. And Councillor Jackie Porter, you are the ward councillor. You have 5 minutes. You know the routine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I won't be taking 5 minutes, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I fully support the principle of the village playground. It has, it's where I started my politics actually, fighting for a better playground exactly there. And it has grown in size enormously, and it does provide the most amazing collection of play equipment for hundreds of children to come out and play every day. So I put that in context, and I appreciate Mrs. Stardle's comment about that as well. But this particular piece has raised quite a lot of concern locally from the people in Holdaway Close, and I felt it is important to represent their views because they are concerned about the potential effect
of older children looking in or using it as or other people using it as effectively a watchtower for their own properties. I realise it's a difficult one for you to decide upon, and although there are trees between the properties and the new equipment, actually they're not directly in front of, and the people that are complaining are literally in full sight, I believe. And it's not just the applicant that's come to speak today, it is other people in that road. The problem that the parish council have is that actually the orientation of the equipment can't really be varied, because slides by good practice can't be facing south, so they can't turn it round any more than it currently is. But there is a potential concession of some sort of screening on those sides of the slide, which currently at the moment are open. That could perhaps be, you can get a different sort of surface, so that it's not necessarily a solid surface, but it could be an opaque surface that stops people looking through. And my concern is that if we don't do this, then it will be a great concern to the people in Holdaway Close.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Members have any questions before you go? No. Good. Okay. Thank you very much. Right. Now we go back to our presenting officer, Megan Osborne. Do you have anything to add? Members will take questions on the whole report. I have a question actually. Did we consider a landscaping condition that would improve the coverage for the nearest houses on Holdaway Close? So did we consider requesting that a couple more trees be planted just on the outskirts of the park that would help with the screening?
I don't feel it's necessary, but it can be put as a condition that extra planting is put there.
Well, I would like to propose that we have an extra condition and require the parish council to plant 2 extra trees in that, and you can see there's a gap on the left hand side there between the path and the play area fence. I think there's room for a couple of trees there. Perhaps one of them could be deciduous and one of them could be evergreen, and that would hopefully cover the issue of any potential overlooking. Do members agree with that proposed condition? Can I see a quick show of hands?
No, Chairman. You're
Councillor
introducing a hazard area inside a children's play area.
No, it wouldn't be inside the children's play area. It would be outside the fenced area.
It's outside.
Yeah.
Chair, if it's outside the red line, then that's outside the application site.
Yeah.
So we can't actually put a condition on that.
I'm informed that we can, because it's within the ownership of the parish council and it's in the blue line area. So, and if we could go back to the picture that shows the existing trees. So if you look at that, where the proposed tower is, if you go straight to the left of that, there is a definite gap, isn't there, between the tree group in the sort of centre left, slightly up a bit. They're slightly south of those existing trees. Yes? Agreed? Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, have we got any more questions on the report for the officer, please? No? Debate? Councillor Reid.
Chair, the only reason this application is before us because of 1.1 metre high. If it was 4 metres, i.e. take the roof off the largest part, it would fall within.
Dismissed, or 3 no with no costs application, and 1 with the appellant's cost application, which was a partial award of costs in favour of the appellant there. But we didn't have any committee decisions that went to appeal in the quarter, which was from the beginning of January this year to March. So if there's any questions about any of the appeals there, then that's something we can discuss now.
Well, I think congratulations are in order to the planning team for having not lost any appeals in the last quarter. Councillor Reid, you have a question.
Just a quickie to clarify that the appeal on number 3 was dismissed, but costs were allowed. And then it's partial costs awarded to the appellant. Can you possibly enlighten us?
It was a procedural issue, I think, in terms of whether we should have accepted or not accepted amended plans from memory, because we'd said we weren't going to accept the amended plans, and the inspectorate said that we probably should have just accepted them in the first place, and then that scheme would have been acceptable. So I think they felt that the appeal was unnecessary if we'd accepted the amended plans.
Any more questions on the report? Comments? Councillor Lee.
You have me at disadvantage. I'm not au fait with this process and procedure. What does this look like in overall terms? Is this a high level or a low level? Is this the usual average?
It's a very good response. Yes.
The government expects us to lose no more than 40% of appeals, so it is good. But we've got our own KPI, which sort of expects about 80%, I think. So it is good. We've normally maintained that level of sort of win, let's say, and that's through, as I was saying yesterday, we're trying to resolve things. We're not just trying to just refuse everything, because then you'll end up spending all your time in appeal rather than spending time with the planning applications and the applicants. So it's good and it's quite consistent.
Great, thanks.
Right, I think we would like to do the tree application, but only if the tree officer is available. He was called out on an emergency TPO. So we're just trying to find out if he's available. So if you don't mind just hanging around for, say, 5 minutes, we'll see if we can bring that forward. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming over, John, before lunch instead of after. Are you okay? You settled? You
Yes, sorry, yeah, I think so, yeah.
right? We can. So this is item number 13 on our agenda, reference TPO 2332, and it's land at Coppers Hill in Titchfield. And the presenting officer is John Bartlett. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is for the confirmation of TPO 2332. The way this came about was that there were letters received from the residents nearby indicating that the pine trees were due to be reduced. And subsequently, through discussions with the management company involved, we found that these trees were going to be, were proposed to be removed. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So the tree concerned is T1, which is shown on the map there. And we subsequently received objections to this tree only out of the three. And there were a number of concerns were raised. So they concerned safety of the tree in terms of the branches it was dropping and the cones, and the deadwood. Also, there were concerns about the alleged damage to the fence there, and so there were a number of concerns that were received. In terms of our response to this, the deadwood that's in the crown of this tree can be removed without permission, without needing permission, so it's exempt from the normal process. And this is quite a natural thing for a pine tree to do, to form deadwood that eventually drops, and then the crown goes eventually higher up the tree. There are engineering solutions that can be sought in terms of the fence, where the fence can be constructed to accommodate the tree so that the tree can be retained. And in terms of the concerns about overhanging branches and cones dropping, there can be an application can be submitted to carry out pruning works within reason that we will then consider. And so that there are options to carry out maintenance on the tree. The amenity value of the tree was also questioned in terms of the objection, but the tree has been found to have public visual amenity value in its own right as an individual tree. So it can be clearly seen from the footpath behind Leafy Lane, 33 and 35 Leafy Lane. So that's one of the three trees. The other two are to the left of it that were subject to the TPO. And yeah, so it can be clearly seen from the footpath, and also from the road. It's poking out on behind the house there. So there's a more partial view, and this is from the side of the property, just as you're entering the footpath next to Leafy Lane. So our recommendation is to confirm TPO 2332. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. We have no public speaking. So members, do we have any questions for our officer? Councillor Reid.
So, Chair, whose ownership are the said trees in?
So the trees are on land that's owned by the management company concerned. The name escapes me at the moment, but the land is owned by the management company to the rear of those properties.
So Gordon Smith?
Yeah, I just wondered, what species of pine are they? Is it a Scots pine?
Yes, Scots pine. There's kind of a mixture of Corsican pines and Scots pines there.
Right, okay.
And
they have quite clear stems eventually, don't they?
Yes. So yeah, as I alluded to, there's what often happens is they'll lose dead branches on the lower stem, and then the crown eventually can become quite mushroom-like at the top. So it's kind of a natural thing for pine trees to do, to eventually drop deadwood over time.
Councillor Ashwell.
Thank you, Chair. Do we know if the management company are due to maintain all these trees along that belt? Because I know the area quite well. There's a lot of trees there.
Well, they are looking to maintain the trees in that area, and obviously subsequently the letter was sent to the residents indicating that they were going to manage them in a particular way. But with pine trees, it's not good arboricultural practice to reduce them, because they don't take well to reductions, and it would have made the tree particularly unsightly, and indeed the other trees next to it as well. But when we had discussions with the management company, it became clear that they were going to remove them.
Any further questions? No? Debate? No debate. Okay, this TPO is recommended for confirmation. So can I see all those in favour of confirming this TPO? Thank you very much indeed. That's all members. Thank you. That is confirmed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, everybody. So we now break for lunch. The Mayor's Parlour has been opened for members to take their sandwiches, etc., to, if that's what you'd like to do. And we will return here at 2 p.m. Thank you.